Good afternoon, Fighting Irish fans, and welcome to another edition of Football Fridays at the Eck, presented by Guinness. I'm your host, Chris Palmquist from the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Well, as much fun as the first 6 games of the 2020 season have been, this is the one we've all been waiting for since the schedule came out. Top-ranked and undefeated Clemson, number 4 and unbeaten Notre Dame, under the lights in South Bend, college game day on campus. It's going to be a great Saturday, and we have a great show to get you ready for it. We'll have performances from the Palm Squad and Harmonia. We'll take a look at this week's What Would You Fight For? We'll hear an amazing story about the first female member of the Irish Guard, and we'll be joined by Lou Somogyi from Blue and Gold Illustrated and Matt Fortuna from The Athletic, as well as Julian Love from the New York Giants and Notre Dame and Pittsburgh Steelers legend Rocky Bleier. But our first guest today grew up just about 60 miles from Clemson's campus. He started 3 seasons at quarterback for the Fighting Irish, was named an All-American his senior year, finished 4th in voting for the Heisman Trophy, and won the Johnny Unitas Golden Arm Award. He's also the last Notre Dame quarterback to lead the Irish to a national championship. From the class of 1990, I'm thrilled to welcome Tony Rice to Football Fridays. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Hey, Chris, thank you for having me. I tell you what, being so far away and not being able to go to the games this year, it's taking a toll, but it's good to be talking to someone on campus. So thank you for inviting me.
Well, hopefully in maybe next fall we can have you in person here. But as I just mentioned, you grew up in South Carolina, pretty close to Clemson. You're a highly touted quarterback prospect. Tell us about your recruiting process and why you chose Notre Dame.
Well, it wasn't my decision to go to Notre Dame. It was my grandmother's decision. And Clemson wasn't that far from me. Clemson was recruiting me. But, when you're that young and you're near Clemson and then someone comes to your house and give you, the story about Notre Dame, and again, you listen to your elders, you're going to follow that little man. And that's one thing that I did. And we'll always listen to our elders and make sure that we do everything right, the right way.
Now, as a reminder to our audience, if you have a question for Tony, go ahead and ask them now in the chat or in the comments section. We'll get to a couple of them later on in the interview. Now, Tony, pretty famously, when you get to Notre Dame, you had to sit out your freshman season due to Prop 48. What was that first year on campus like for you?
You know what? Looking back at it, it's probably one of the best years of my life at Notre Dame, because I had a chance to interact with the regular students, and I was called a student instead of a student athlete. And I wasn't allowed to practice or do anything with the football team, but I had a good supporting cast of people in my dorm and people in other dorms that was throwing football with me and lifting weights with me and just trying to make sure that I keep everything in order from what I'm there for. And the first thing I was there for was in the classroom. Second thing, I was an athlete. So student athlete comes first.
And that's the perfect transition. The second part being on the field, and you obviously had a ton of success when you did get on the field here at Notre Dame. 87, your sophomore season, you become the starter after an injury, run off 5 straight wins, but the team does lose 3 straight to end the year. We all know that 1988 turned into a special season, but heading into that offseason between 87 and 88, off those 3 straight losses, what's the mindset like for that team? Did you guys know what was coming?
We didn't know what was coming, but we didn't know who was going to be starting quarterback. I still didn't have that job secured. Kent Graham was the backup and everything. Luckily that he pushed me to the limit to be the best quarterback out there for Saturday. And practice was hard. You couldn't wait for the game time to come because of so much thing we had to learn, because every team does not run the same defense. So you have to learn different schemes the whole entire time. And with that being said, our team had so many good athletes that they can play any position. Unlike me, they call myself a good athlete. I only can play one position. That was quarterback. I was too small to play any other positions out there.
A couple of weeks ago, we had Lee Bechten as our guest, and he had a great story about some of his times in practice. Obviously, you played for a pretty loaded coaching staff, some big characters on those teams in the late 80s, early 90s. What are some of the memories of maybe practice or meetings or off the field stuff?
Well, practice was like you're playing a game too. But Coach Holtz, you have to do everything right. And I ran the option. And people don't know that I can run the ball as well. So you have to step at a certain angle, whatever side you go, and have to be at a 45. And Coach Holtz used to stop me in practice. Don't move. And he used to get a little ruler out and said, that was 43. Or that was 46. I want 45. So when you're practicing, he wants you to be the best at practice. So game time comes, it just runs simple. You were used to doing that. But being a quarterback, and I tried to think like he was thinking on the football field, because I was a quarterback, the leader. So I want to put myself in his situation. What would he do if he came up against a player like that? So that's when it goes to practice, repetition every time. Then when game time came, it was easy.
It obviously translated really well on Saturdays. I want to talk about one game in specific in that 1988 season. Undefeated and fourth-ranked Notre Dame hosts undefeated and number 1 Miami, just like this weekend. What are your memories of that game?
Well, since I live in Miami now, it's kind of weird. I went on campus one time, so I had to do this right here to them. But, I have so much respect for the Hurricanes. And it was just one of those games that you can see electricity in the game as far as the players being hyped up, but also the fans and our student section. We tried to get that energy, in which they gave us that energy to go ahead and play, but then also to execute and do it for our team. It was one of those things that you would never forget. And it's been over 30-some years ago. I never forget, because I know plays now that I ran, and I can call out what play you're talking about, that game that I ran, because of embedded in my head, because it was one of the high talented games around there that people wanted to see, and people saw, and they saw a good game. And obviously we came out victorious. And I got that to say about them, that, hey, we went all the way and we beat the Hurricanes that year.
And then, of course, that spurred you on to just a dominant stretch to close out that season. You rolled through everybody, set up a Fiesta Bowl matchup with West Virginia. And we talked about Coach Holtz just a little bit ago. He famously, in the lead up to that game, said that his team couldn't throw the ball. All you did was go 7 for 11 for 213 and a couple of touchdowns. But, kind of tell us a little bit about that storyline.
Well, you know what? They put all the pressure on Major Harris instead of Tony Rice. And I loved it. I love pressure too, but it got to the point that all the attention was on Major, but our defense was there. And I always, say to Major, Major had a major breakdown with our defense. But he was a great quarterback, and he did everything for his team. And the only thing I had to do is make sure I take my team out of a bad situation, put them in the right situation, and follow the script that we had that week. I know if I didn't turn the ball over, didn't throw an interception, it's basically the same thing, that we'll win the game. And our defense came to play, and the special teams didn't have a turnover, we had no chance of losing. So it was a great game. And I never wanted that season to end. Who are we gonna play next? Oh, it's over. You gotta wait till next year. I'm like, oh man, come on. Now we have to start back over, which we did pretty good starting back over that next year.
That's an interesting segue too. I mentioned earlier that you were the quarterback for the last national championship winning team here at Notre Dame. Come close a couple of times, including the very next season, 93, 2012. You could argue 2018 as well. But I'm interested to hear what's that feeling like of winning a national championship and being able to say that you are the best team in the country.
Yeah. Once you accomplish something like that, and I always say that I cannot be beat on the field, it carries a heavy burden on you that a lot of people are depending on you. And what you're going to do? You did it last year. They're expecting to do it again, which we almost came close. But you had that one team that stood in our way, and they had a revenge on us, and that was the Miami Hurricanes. And they had a good season that year, but then we had a good team as well. The best team won that day, and they did. If we had a chance to do it all over again, yeah, I'll do it all over again, because I hate to lose. And I want to make our players, make our coaching staff, make myself happy. No one goes out there to lose. And you give me the ball, and I'm trying to put my team in the right situation, because I was taught by a great leader, and that was Coach Holtz, that made me feel like I trust you at the helm of being a quarterback for our team. Now, let me go see what you can do.
We have a good question that I just saw come across here, so I want to go ahead and leave some time to get to that here. Now, Tony, Matt from the class of 1984 asks, what are the 3 key levers that the Irish need to execute perfectly, like you mentioned there with your anecdote about Coach Holtz tomorrow in order to beat Clemson?
Well, first of all, it goes back with the quarterback and go back with your running backs and receivers as well. Don't turn the ball over as one of the key components. Have a good special teams like they've been having. Don't miss field goals, trying to take the ball away from them. And a defense. The defense, if they don't let them score, you win. So those are the three things that Coach Holtz embedded in our head, being a player for him, that if you come out doing those three things, you'll win.
Tony, before I let you go here, I also have to ask, I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your prediction for tomorrow night? A very good Notre Dame team, obviously a very good Clemson team, but missing their own Tony Rice back there, Trevor Lawrence.
Of course, I'm looking at Notre Dame, and I say since Notre Dame is playing at home, it'll be by 10. If Trevor was going to play, it'll still be by 10. Because it seems like Notre Dame, the energy, we have our students, we have our band, we got that Notre Dame fight song, we got the lady on the dome at home. So I think Notre Dame will win by 10.
You guys heard it here first. Tony Rice says Notre Dame wins by 10. And Tony, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really hope we can do this again in the future, hopefully in person right here at the ECC.
Chris, anything for you.
I appreciate it. Everybody, thank you again. Tony Rice from the class of 1990. Now, in addition to the standouts we'll see on the field tomorrow night when the Irish line up against the Tigers, the Notre Dame student body, of course, is full of talent, whether it's athletically, academically, or in the arts. Harmonia was founded in 2000 and has become Notre Dame's premier all-female a cappella group. Over the years, Harmonia has become a regular in-person guest here at Football Fridays. We hope to have them back in person next season, but in the meantime, they've adapted to our current coronavirus situation. Join us now for a rendition of the Alma Mater and the Victory March.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Notre Dame, our mother, tender, strong, and true, proudly in the heavens, gleams thy gold and blue. Glory's mantle clothes thee, golden is thy fame, and our hearts forever praise thee, Notre Dame, and our hearts forever love thee, Notre Dame.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Rally, sons of Notre Dame, sing her glory and sound her fame. Raise her golden blue and cheer with voices true. Rah, rah, for Notre Dame. We will fight in every game, strong of heart and true to her name. We will never forget her and will cheer her ever loyal to Notre Dame. Cheer, cheer for old Notre Dame. Wake up the echoes cheering her name. Send a volley, cheer on high. Shake down the thunder from the sky. What though the odds be great or small, old Notre Dame will win over all. While her loyal sons and daughters march on to victory. Cheer, cheer for old Notre Dame. Wake up the echoes cheering her name. Send a volley, cheer on high. Shake down the thunder from the sky. What though the odds be great or small, old Notre Dame will win over all. While her loyal sons and daughters march on to victory. Onward to victory for Notre Dame. Go Irish!
Oh, be sure to give Harmonia a like, a follow, or a subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube, and support our incredibly talented Notre Dame students. Well, next Wednesday is Veterans Day here in the United States. On behalf of the Notre Dame Alumni Association, I would like to thank any veterans who are watching today and all who have sacrificed and served our country. Our university has several connections to the armed forces, from Father Corby serving as a chaplain during the Civil War to the Guide Country Notre Dame World War I Memorial Door at the Basilica of the Sacred Heart, and of course our long-standing history with the U.S. Naval Academy, both on and off the field. Countless members of the Notre Dame family have served and sacrificed in the armed forces, including our next guest. Rocky Bleier played for the 1966 national champion Fighting Irish football team and served as a team captain before graduating in 1968. He was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers and then a year later again by the U.S. Army and was deployed to Vietnam, where he was wounded in combat and awarded the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. Despite several surgeries to his leg and foot, Bleier returned to the Steelers and won 4 Super Bowls in his 11-year career. Earlier this week, Dolly Duffy, the executive director of the Notre Dame Alumni Association, caught up with Rocky to talk about his service and amazing story.
Rocky, it is so great to see you. How are you?
I'm fine, Dolly. Thank you very much for having me. And, what a neat way of being able to reconnect with one another in this Zoom world that we live in.
Absolutely. I know most everybody who is watching this knows your background, but because it's so amazing, I just want to remind people, national champion in 1966, and you were a 4-time Super Bowl champion with Pittsburgh. But in between there, a lot of things happened, and your football career with the Pittsburgh Steelers was paused when you were drafted into the Army and sent to Vietnam. Most people know that story, but for anybody who doesn't, could you tell us a little bit about that tour of duty?
Well, of course, and we just have to go back to that period of time. It was 1968. It was the height of the war in Vietnam. For those of us who lived through that period of time, it wasn't necessarily a well-received conflict that we were involved in. And unfortunately, unlike today, the military were attached to the war. And so with protests that were going on around the country during that time about the war, so they reflected back on the veteran himself or on the military personnel. So a lot of people were getting drafted, some enlisting to get their obligation out of the way during that period of time. And of course, I was with the Pittsburgh Steelers because of the great success that Eric Parsegian had at Notre Dame, and allowed me to get drafted into the NFL. And so I was then sent over to Vietnam. And it's much like today, at sometimes, all of a sudden your life is put on hold for no reason that you have a control over. And so the best that you can do is to just get through that period as best possible. And so I was with an infantry unit in Vietnam in an area called Hep Doc. Eventually, we got into a firefight with the enemy, and I was wounded twice in the same day, both in both my legs, one by an AK-47, secondly by a grenade that blew up to my right foot, knee, and thigh. And we were again in that firefight, and company, another platoon fought its way down, got us out of there, and I spent the next 9 months in the hospital going through 3 operations, and then having to start all over. The prognosis was I would not be able to play again because of the damage done to my legs specifically. But my thought process was, well, I didn't lose any limbs, so I've been hurt before. We've gone through this process before. It just takes time to heal, and with the right coach, and you start the process all over again, and go through rehab, and hopefully get to a point where you get a chance to come back. At that period of time, so I came back and was invited to come back to the Steelers in 1970 when I got out of the service, and they basically, and I'm telling you this, they bought me 2 years. They put me on injured reserve 1 year. They put me on the taxi squad the second year. So I hung around, and they gave me 2 years of an opportunity. And I guess that's all we could ever ask, is just having an opportunity. But 2 years to heal, 2 years to get bigger, stronger, faster, and then you have to do something with that opportunity. And eventually, I made the team, special teams, and then by 1974, I got a chance to break into the starting lineup, and we go to the Super Bowl, and I play 6 more years, and so altogether, I play 12 years in the NFL, and then retire thereafter.
Well, and another thing came out of the war and your injury. You were awarded both the Purple Heart and Bronze Star. So, which is pretty amazing. Then you come back and you won 4 Super Bowls. And I would say that your name, and it's for Notre Dame people, but certainly way beyond that, is a household name. And yet people don't always know your story. But you've been very instrumental in the Vietnam War commemoration and worked with us. Tell our audience a little about the work that you did with Reunion a couple years ago that was so unbelievable.
Well, with the Reunion, and it was we had our so my class had our 50th anniversary on a reunion coming back, and so part of that, and I had the opportunity to work with the Vietnam Board of Directors on recognizing and getting the message out of to the Vietnam veterans, and a great thank you for all the support that they have given, their families have given, the sacrifices that have given up. So this was a process, and so one of the thoughts on a reunion was that I thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice, because we're right in the middle of that, to be able to give a recognition, and there was an accommodation medal that was given by Congress for all Vietnam veterans. And so we were able to give that pin to those who had returned, those who had served in the military, and make it a part of our weekend at the reunion. And maybe long time waiting, and because a lot of Vietnam veterans, had never been really thanked for their service, not necessarily about the war, but for their service. And this was that recognition, just to thank you for being a veteran, and thank you for serving and defending this country. And so I was very happy and proud to be able to be involved in that.
I'll never forget it. It was really one of the most moving parts of any reunion that I've ever witnessed. Well, and we've been able to do it a second time as well. So thanks right. for that opportunity. And I would say in closing, because I could talk to you all day, but in closing, that you are the essence of what it means to be a true Notre Dame man. And thanks for always representing Notre Dame so well.
Well, thank you very much, Natalie, as always, and I appreciate our friendship, and it's been great to be with you over the years and so on. And we got a big game this week. I just want to take this opportunity to be able to talk about it, go Irish, and bring home another victory.
Well, again, thank you, Rocky, and to all of our veterans for your service. Well, as Rocky said, not only is tomorrow night's game between the Irish and Clemson the biggest game of the season so far in college football, it's the biggest one in Notre Dame Stadium since at least 2005, if not longer. ESPN's College Game Day is broadcasting from campus tomorrow morning. The roughly 10,000 allowed in the stadium will be wearing green tomorrow night. And this game will likely play a big factor in the ACC championship game and possibly the college football playoff. I'm happy to welcome in our next guest here on Football Fridays at the ECK, presented by Guinness, to talk about the matchup with the Tigers and the impact on the college football landscape. Returning to the program is a member of the Notre Dame class of 1984 and senior editor at Blue and Gold Illustrated, Lou Somogyi. And joining us for the first time, I'm pleased to welcome formerly of the Notre Dame beat and current national college football reporter at The Athletic, Matt Fortuna. Lou, Matt, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Chris. My green just doesn't quite match yours there. It's more like the McDonald's lime shake, shamrock shake. Sorry about that.
You look like those McFlurry uniforms we wore on the basketball court a few years ago. But let's talk football instead of basketball. Matt, I want to start with you. The biggest news of this matchup, obviously, is Trevor Lawrence not playing. But we got to look at DJ, and I'm going to try my best here, Uiagalelei last week.
That's pretty good.
Thank you. There's a reason he was one of the top quarterback recruits in the country last year. How does that change under center change this matchup?
I mean, I think anytime you take out a player who is the best NFL draft prospect since at least Andrew Luck, so we're talking almost a decade here, that has to be a difference. You can't just replace that guy at a moment's notice. Now, DJ Uiagalelei came pretty close to doing that in his debut last week against Boston College. I mean, I don't think this kid is going to be rattled. He was a freshman making his first career start, facing an 18-point hole at home, and led them back and down the field. So he's got a big arm. He's not as fast as Trevor Lawrence, but he's 250 pounds. He's really tough to bring down. You don't want him to get free in the open field. So I don't think schematically Clemson's offense will change a whole lot. But I do think there are different things you need to look out for, particularly release time, because I think Trevor Lawrence's release time is just otherworldly compared to anyone has faced since he's got in college.
When DJ got running downhill on that 30-yard touchdown last week, I don't think anyone was going to stop him. Now, Lou, that actually sets up a perfect segue to you, though. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen Clark Lea's defense step up the havoc plays. 5 sacks against Georgia Tech, 3 takeaways against Pitt. What does Notre Dame have to do defensively to make that freshman uncomfortable back in the pocket?
Well, they talked about it extensively, as you have to make them uncomfortable, maybe changing up some coverages. I'm sure the game plan for most will be around Travis Etienne, kind of the other guy in that Clemson attack, who's the all-time leading rusher in ACC history, the 2-time ACC Player of the Year. And he hurts you not only with his running skills, but this year he's especially been lethal in the run-pass option game. He has 29 receptions, which is pretty good for a running back in itself, but they average 15 yards, which is highly unusual at that position, because most of the time you're thinking of checkoffs or checkdowns and 3-yard dump offs to just not lose yardage. But he's a legitimate weapon. And at the same time, there is nobody else in that backfield for Clemson who has more than 87 yards rushing. Compared to Notre Dame, who has 4 guys over 200 yards, led by Kyron Williams at 200. So there is so much placed on Travis, because there also is not that Justin Ross or T. Higgins. Amari Rodgers has come on pretty well with them, but as far as just the pure explosiveness, it's not quite like that 2018 team.
Now, as always, if you have a question for Matt or Lou, be sure to ask them now in the chat or comments. We'll get to them a little bit later. Matt, we just talked about the scare that Clemson got last week. We've already kind of mentioned Trevor Lawrence being out. There are some other absences this week as well. I'm curious, though, from a national perspective, even with those absences, what would a win like this do for Notre Dame? We've heard over the years how they can't get over the hump and win the big one.
It would do a lot. I mean, reputation-wise, it would be huge, because like you said, this is a narrative that has found this program, and whether it's fair or not, I think there could be a healthy debate about that. I think you have to be good enough to be in a number of these big games to be on that stage. So I wouldn't dock the program a whole lot, but I mean, Trevor Lawrence, this would be without question the biggest win in Brian Kelly's 11 years at Notre Dame. I mean, Oklahoma in 2012 is kind of in a league of its own right now, and this one would shatter that one, again, even without Trevor Lawrence. So I think it would give Notre Dame a huge benefit of the doubt moving forward. I mean, it would all but assure them of getting to the ACC title game December 19th in Charlotte, where they would probably play Clemson, who would probably have Trevor Lawrence, and we get to do this exercise all over again. But it would be really tough to make the playoff with 2 losses to Clemson. If you split 1-1, I think you got a really good chance. But big picture, national-wise, I mean, you hear it all the time. I mean, Notre Dame can't win the big one. They haven't won a major bowl game since 1994, I think. That really, since 1993, the game of the century against Florida State was their last signature win that reverberated throughout the country. This would exercise those demons, so to speak. So regardless of playoff implications, regardless of who's playing, who's not playing tomorrow night, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for the program.
Lou, offensively, we know Notre Dame wants to run the ball, and they've been able to do that basically at will throughout the first 6 games of the season. You just talked about Kyron Williams back there leading the way. This is a next-level defense, though, regardless of who might be missing. Brent Venables, if not the best defensive coordinator in the country, one of the top 3 defensive coordinators in the country. If Notre Dame does win this game tomorrow night, what does the offense have to do?
Well, the first thing I think is what it doesn't have to do. You're talking turnovers, which they haven't done in the last 2 games there, other than Kyron Williams' fumble being returned there. That's always an instrumental aspect. But going off Matt's theme about these marquee type of games, this is where Notre Dame's offense has sputtered the most with the ground attack. You look at the Georgia game last year, 14 carries for 46 yards. The playoff game against Clemson, Dexter Williams, 54 yards on 16 carries. They had only 88 yards. The Georgia game here in 2017, that was a Notre Dame team that averaged 270 yards rushing with Quentin Nelson, Mike McGlinchey. They were held to 55 yards in that game. You go back all the way to the Alabama BCS championship game, 32 yards, 19 carries. Notre Dame does not have to rush for its average of 231 yards in this game, but what it cannot afford is those 40, 50, 60 yards where they have to really rely so much on the passing attack, which is still kind of a work in progress at this point. So, yeah, I'm sure Brent Venables, again, will be putting the pressure on the Notre Dame ground attack to see, okay, we're going to focus in on stopping that, and let's see if the passing attack can defeat Notre Dame. They ran for 115 yards against Pittsburgh, but it was an effective 115 yards. They converted 6 third and short situations, kept the chains moving, controlled the ball for 41 minutes. You take away the sacks a little bit, and it's maybe up to 130 or so. If you can get into that 141, and I hate putting arbitrary numbers on it, but if you can get into that 140, 150, where you're able to strike a bit of a balance and force the Clemson defense to honor different areas of the game, run and the pass, then I think Notre Dame's chances will be greatly enhanced.
And Matt, earlier this week in an article on The Athletic, you brought up Coach Kelly's comments after that Cotton Bowl in 2018 that these two teams were closer than the 30-3 final score. I also this morning heard your prediction on the Shamrock, so I know where you're going with this, but for anyone who wasn't listening, are Coach Kelly's comments right? Does Notre Dame get it done tomorrow night?
I think his comments are right. Now, I don't think, frankly, if we're talking about reputations, I don't think anyone outside of South Bend cares whether he was right or not, because the final score is the final score. It doesn't matter that Clemson did to Alabama a week later what it did to Notre Dame when they won the national championship in 2018. So I do think Brian Kelly's comments are right. I mean, they were a play away from beating Georgia last year, and that would have officially validated those comments. So I think absolutely Notre Dame goes into this game with a tremendous chance to win, especially when you look at the matchup. Notre Dame is a ground and pound attack. They're playing a Clemson defense that's going to be missing a lot of guys who are really good against the run. Tyler Davis, James Skalski, Xavier Thomas for the first half, who was ejected last week for targeting. So I definitely think Notre Dame is in position to win this game. I took Clemson 27-20 just because I think some of the mistakes and some of the stuff where they were slow out of the gate last week, they got out of their system, especially with a new quarterback under center. And I just think Brent Venables is going to have a game plan. I think he's earned the benefit of the doubt in his 8-9 years in Death Valley, where he's the best defensive coordinator in the country. I don't think Notre Dame can simply run the ball over and over and over again without Clemson forcing them to make a couple plays downfield. And so far, Notre Dame hasn't proven they can do that. They could prove me wrong tomorrow night, and they're going to need to do that, I think, to win this game. But without having seen it so far this season, I like Clemson a close one.
Lou, I want to be sure we leave time for an audience question here, but before we get to that, this is, the biggest game in Notre Dame Stadium since at least 05, if not maybe 93. Who wins the game and why?
All I said in the preseason was that Notre Dame and Clemson were going to face each other twice in 2019, and they were going to split it, or 2020. I'm sorry, I've got to get their year right there. And they were going to split it. I have no idea whether it's December 19th or November 7th, but they will split, and I would not be surprised. Let's play 3.
The country would love that.
I was just going to say, ESPN would probably like that as well.
Yeah.
Before we let you guys go, I want to take one question here from the audience before we have to move on. So, when you look at this Clemson offense, Notre Dame defense, the Notre Dame offense against the Clemson defense, are there some mismatches that you could see really making the difference in this game, specifically with Clemson's explosive offense and Travis Etienne and Notre Dame's stifling defense?
Do you want me to take it? I'll go first. I think the biggest thing you need to worry about if you're Notre Dame's defense is letting Travis Etienne get loose as a receiver. Lou talked earlier about how this is not the Clemson offense of 2018 that had all these first-round picks catching passes from Trevor Lawrence. They have Amari Rodgers, who's been very, very good, but is only about 5'9". They really haven't had any proven deep threats make plays for them so far this season. Travis Etienne has been their second best receiver, in addition to being probably the best running back in the country. So if I'm Notre Dame's linebackers, I am keeping an eye on that guy all night, no matter what happens, because he is absolutely capable of making plays both on the ground and through the air.
I would have to concur with that. I could see a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah or a Kyle Hamilton being specifically assigned to Travis as far as don't let him out of your sights. And you're talking about two potential All-Americans there as well. I'm pretty confident in the line matchups here, because this is not the Clemson 2018 defensive line that had 3 players taken among the first 17 NFL picks 4 months later. Now, don't get me wrong, there's going to be future first rounders here too, but they have 2 true freshmen who are top 5 players, granted, in Miles Murphy and Brian Bresee in the interior. But Notre Dame's got a bunch of pros on the offensive line as well. And they've been in strength and conditioning programs for 4 or 5 years. I think they can match up there. And Clemson has 4 first-year starters there along the offensive line this year as well, whereas Notre Dame, it's an all-senior, basically, front 7. So I think from an experience standpoint, they don't have to take a back seat in the trenches.
That's good stuff. We will find out tomorrow night. You can read Lou's work at blueandgold.com. You can read Matt's work on The Athletic. Listen to him on the Shamrock. Lou, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. Had a blast.
All right. Well, after tomorrow, believe it or not, there's only one home game remaining for the Fighting Irish, and the students will already be long done with their semester by the time December 5th rolls around and Syracuse comes to town. So much about this semester has been different for our students, including something as basic as how they eat their meals. But just like every previous year, every student has that favorite food from the dining hall. For me, it's a toss-up between that pasta stir-fry and some peppered flank steak. And we caught up with some students to find out what makes their eyes light up when they visit either North or South.
The best dining hall food is probably the fries.
The best dining hall food thus far, Boom Boom Chicken, without a doubt.
There's gnocchi one time. That was pretty good.
Favorite dining hall food? I really like to make paninis. So if you go in the back and get like a toast and you can put it in the panini press, that's really good. So that's my favorite food.
I would say the best dining hall food is the omelet station. It's not open right now, but I'm a big fan of eggs and just being able to, make some of my own food.
Oh, my favorite dining hall food is like those potatoes they have at breakfast. So good.
I like when they do the braised beef. I'm a fan of that. Also, the cheeseburgers are good.
The Cinco de Mayo Mexican spread.
General Tso's cauliflower. Unpopular opinion, but I think it slaps.
Southwest salad all the way, baby. Whoa, let's go.
I've never heard cauliflower described that way. But every week here at Football Fridays at the Egg, presented by Guinness, we get to take a sneak peek at the latest edition of the award-winning What Would You Fight For series. These clips air during halftime of home Notre Dame football games on NBC and highlight the outstanding work being done by Notre Dame faculty, students, and staff as a force for good in the world. And now, this week's segment, Fighting to Reach the Next Frontier in Space.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Space exploration has served as the foundation for the technology that improves life for everyone here on Earth. But as far as we've advanced, there are still grave risks. Solar radiation and cosmic rays are some of the biggest dangers we face as astronauts as we leave Earth's atmosphere.
As we look ahead to longer missions, extended trips to the moon, and roaming on Mars, it's critical that we improve the spacesuits that they rely on for their safety.
At the University of Notre Dame's world-renowned radiation laboratory, Professor Jay Laverne has partnered with Georgia Tech and UC Davis to test new equipment for NASA's next generation of space exploration.
Developing a spacesuit is a multi-decade process. No matter how good the materials and instrumentation are, if it can't withstand radiation, it's worthless to the astronauts. We're working directly with Professor Jay Laverne at the Notre Dame Radiation Laboratory because they are the experts in radiation.
Since World War II, the University of Notre Dame has been at the forefront of radiation research, helping to make advancements in medicine, energy, and space.
We're also helping to develop new monitoring devices, giving astronauts better and faster information in real time to monitor radiation levels, oxygen levels, and other vital statistics that they may need.
Space exploration has given us the opportunity to change the world in ways we never thought possible.
And we can only imagine what will inspire in the next generation of scientists.
The University of Notre Dame asks, what would you fight for?
Fighting to reach the next frontier in space.
We are the Fighting Irish.
And as always, I'm happy to welcome back to the program Double Domer and producer and director of multimedia services at Notre Dame, Beth Grizzoli. Beth, thanks as always for taking the time to be with us today.
Hi, Chris. Glad to be with you.
Now, those of us like you and me who aren't astronauts can usually think of a lot of dangers that might come with that job, but radiation isn't typically one of the first ones that come to mind. What stood out to you about this story and the research?
Exactly. I mean, many of us remember that awful scene we watched on television when the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, and that's what we think about. But I had an amazing first discussion with Jay Laverne, who's our professor who's featured in this story. And I'll never forget when he said, radiation is the biggest danger in space. And the longer the stays are in space, the greater the risk is to human life. And that's what he does all day long, is he tests various materials for radiation. So it just, what I learned from this story was, he said, we were sitting in this conversation and he picked up his cell phone. He said, we can have the most sophisticated equipment here on Earth that can do so many different things. And it's absolutely worthless in space if it can't stand radiation. And so that's his goal, is he wants the astronauts to be safe. He wants to design, equipment on their suits where they can watch exactly how much radiation exposure they're getting in real time. And it was just very eye-opening to me.
Now, speaking of eye-opening, this season your team has told stories about brachial plexus injuries, climate-resilient communities, compassion in medicine. I'm not going to make you choose your favorite because I assume it's like your children. You love them all equally. But which one maybe surprised you or stood out the most?
I do love them like my children. I have to admit about that. I would have to say probably our very first story about compassion in medicine, because I think it brought to light the compassion caregivers need to have for themselves and for each other, and the compassion we need to have for our caregivers. Given the terrible situation we've been in for the past, since the spring, it's been so hard on them, and they've been really bearing a big load. And so the story of Sam Grew, our student who is so inspiring, and just the program that's unique to Notre Dame, the Compassionate Care and Medicine program, it's unique as an undergraduate program here, made me really proud of the university.
And before I let you go, we saw a glimpse of the famous football down there in the radiation building. Got to ask, what's your prediction for tomorrow night?
Oh my gosh, Chris, I just dare not go there. I predict that the Irish fans will show up and be supportive in their full vigor. I predict we may see a marshmallow or two on screen, and that our team's going to make us very proud. That's my prediction.
I can't disagree with that one. Beth, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks to your team for all the great stories this season.
Happy to be here.
Well, now this season, we've been proud to welcome Guinness, official beer of Notre Dame alumni and friends, as the presenting sponsor of Football Fridays at the ECK. This week, Guinness is teamed with Notre Dame legend Joe Montana to announce this new partnership.
Guinness and Notre Dame. It's a partnership 200 years in the making. But it's not just because we're Irish. It's bigger than that. We're champions, because we play like underdogs. We will surprise you. You think our beer looks heavy? But take a sip, and it's light and smooth. Who pioneered the forward pass? The Fighting Irish. Who created nitro beer? The Brewing Irish. Here's to a future with the wind at our backs. The Irish are coming, and everyone's invited.
Well, across all of college football, it's tough to say that there's a program with more tradition than Notre Dame. From the 11 national championships and 7 Heisman trophies on the field to the 1812 Overture, the Dillon Hall Pep Rally, and candlelight dinner in the dining halls after the game off it. One of the most uniquely Notre Dame traditions, though, is the Irish Guard. Started in 1949, the Irish Guard is instantly recognizable by their kilts, Notre Dame tartan, and bearskin shako. Their job is to protect the band and, after wins, perform the victory clog. Throughout its first 51 years, the Irish Guard was solely comprised of men. But 20 years ago this fall, Molly Kinder became its first female member, and with a little help from another Irish Guard alum she calls her guardian angel.
For 20 years, I have wondered who was that Irish Guard member who was so kind to me.
When Molly Kinder lined up for her first inspection as the first female member of the Irish Guard on September 2nd, 2000, she wasn't sure what to expect.
Some university administrators pulled me into their office and said that they had heard from a lot of alum of the university who were very upset with my selection. It was very controversial at the time. There was a lot of support, but as much opposition. Frankly, I was pretty nervous. I was staring straight ahead, and I was just saying some prayers in my head that nothing would go wrong, that would embarrass me in front of all these people I love.
During the inspection, Molly's fellow members of the Guard got most of the attention, leaving her alone on the end of the line.
I have to say I breathed a sigh of relief because those Guard alum that came forward, they went to all the other guys to my right. They just left me alone on the end. Nobody came forward. I didn't get inspected. I was just sort of left alone. And if I had to choose between maybe hearing some things that were not so nice to me or just being left alone was not so bad.
But one former Irish Guard member, Paul Reavers, along with his young daughter, saw Molly and made all the difference on this nerve-wracking day.
I saw him come up out of the corner of my eye with this beautiful daughter with blonde hair. And he was holding her and he said, "Molly, welcome to the Irish Guard. This is my daughter. She hopes to be on the Irish Guard someday." And just, me standing there, I had little tears in my eyes. I was so moved by this stranger who was so kind to me and so welcoming.
She looked like she needed a little pick-me-up. And so I brought Courtney over and said a couple of nice things, like she said, and never thought twice about it, actually. And so it is kind of a wonderful story.
For 20 years, Molly had no idea who Paul was. So earlier this fall, she asked for help from social media, and before too long, the connection was made.
My phone was lighting up after that she put this out on Twitter. I started getting texts that night of, "Is that you?" And then it was, "What did you say?" I'm like, "I thought I said something really nice."
You did.
That short moment not only resonated with Molly for 2 decades, but shows the connection of the Notre Dame family.
I was so moved by this stranger who was so kind to me and so welcoming. It was a small gesture, but it's one that 20 years later has made all the difference to me and has really it was the best example to me of why I love Notre Dame.
Well, our final guest today on Football Fridays is one of the best cornerbacks in Notre Dame history. A 3-year starter, he was a consensus All-American in 2018, becoming just the 10th defensive back in Fighting Irish history to earn that accolade. A 4th-round selection in the 2019 NFL Draft by the New York Giants, Julian Love sat down with Dolly Duffy, the executive director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing great. For those of you who are watching this, you all know Julian Love, one of the great players to come out of Notre Dame, consensus All-American and a team captain in 2018. He was an all-time Notre Dame leader in pass breakups, drafted by the New York Giants. But what I want to throw in there is one of the few players that I've gotten to know over the years somewhat. And everything on his stat sheet is amplified by the incredible person that you are off the field. And so thrilled to have you on this interview.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Well, and so 2 things that are not on there, 2 big new things in your life. It's my understanding that you are engaged and you now are one of the newest Notre Dame alums as of this spring. Tell us about both of those.
Yeah, so it's been a fun year so far. After my rookie season, I came back to ND. It was just me and my dog, and we were staying on Eddy Street, and yeah, finished my classes. I kind of grinded away. Took a few each summer since I've been gone, and kind of got the rest of the load done this spring, and was able to graduate with my graduating class. And so I was really, I'm really proud of that. I always want to finish the job with the people I started it with, and I was able to. Notre Dame helped me with everything, and they were so kind. The business school, everybody was really accommodating for my schedule and how hectic everything was, especially in the spring. And so that was great. And then yeah, end of the summer, I proposed to my long time girlfriend. She went to St. Mary's grad. And yeah, it's been 6 years. And so I popped the question, and she said yes, thankfully.
Yeah, you probably had a pretty good idea she was going to say yes.
Yeah, pretty good idea. High school sweethearts, all that stuff. But yeah, we're doing well, and it's been a up and down year for a lot of people, but I had some great moments.
Well, you mentioned your rookie season, and so I'm curious, what lessons from Notre Dame that you took with you helped you to having such a successful rookie season?
I think one of the main things is kind of just time management. When you're a Notre Dame student athlete, you have a lot on your plate at all times, it feels like, and dealing with classes, dealing with your social life, as well as whatever sport you're in, is a lot. And so when I got to New York, I was able to it got a little easier. I was able to hone in on just football. That was my job. And when I wasn't away from the game, I wasn't doing wild things. I was just kind of living my life and kind of enjoying my time. And that definitely helped. As the season progressed, I was able to kind of stay fresh longer. I was just kind of ready at all times to go in and competed my butt off. And yeah, so I had fun. It was a good rookie season.
You said you didn't do any wild things, but you certainly didn't do any wild things when you were at Notre Dame, right?
No, never. I'm a laid back type of guy. Yeah, not too much.
Well, you were an All-American cornerback in 2018, and you led a secondary that ranked 4th in passing defense. And some of those players are still here. When you look at the team right now and you think about Saturday night, how do you think what do they look like for you?
It's exciting. I'm filled with such pride, happiness, and a little bit of sadness when I see the games, because I do miss it. I really enjoyed my time at Notre Dame. I love that school. I grew up a Notre Dame fan, and so it's a little bittersweet watching still. But it's great to see the guys out there. Guys like Sean Crawford, he's still there. And Sean, obviously, this is his 6th year. He was the guy who mentored me when I was a rookie. He was the guy who literally we were roommates at Culver in training camp, and he was helping me when I was struggling at a time when I was still learning the game, and he helped me. He taught me the game, and so to see got role models out there still, best friends, guys who I've hosted. Like Kyle Hamilton's doing so well. I hosted him when he visited with his family in Notre Dame. And all that sorts of stuff. And so it's a whole bunch of emotions and feelings when I see the game, and it's been fun. I'm glad they're doing well.
So you've played against Clemson, and you know what this team looks like. What advice would you give these guys in their play for Saturday night?
Yeah, I think the main thing is play your game. Don't worry about Clemson too much, and who they are, all the reputation that they've had over the years. This is a new season. It's a new game, and Notre Dame is ready. There's guys who now have had experience playing them, coaching staff that has been together for now a few years, and now they have experience playing against Clemson. And just don't stray from the formula. They've been doing such a great job this year through unbelievable circumstances, and so I think the main thing for me is to just stick to your formula. Be Notre Dame. Just be yourself, and just everybody do their jobs, and they should come away with a solid game and a win.
That's great. So what is the one thing that you miss the most about your time at Notre Dame?
Ooh, there's so much. I think honestly, I really loved running out of the tunnel and just kind of playing in front of a lot of people. There's nothing like playing at Notre Dame Stadium, but I probably missed the most just my time with my friends, with whether it was in the locker room, in classes, walking to and from classes, early morning spring practices, is walking in the dark at like 5 a.m. to a spring ball practice. There's all those little moments is what I miss the most, and those are my best friends. I still talk to them almost every day. And that's what I miss most because, you have some fifth-year guys who were my class, Dalen Hayes leading the charge, on the defensive end. And so guys like that, just, I miss that. I miss hanging out with those guys. And so that's probably the part that gets me the most.
And I have no doubt that they miss you too.
Well, good. Yeah.
I know you've just come from practice and fit this in typical Julian style, always saying yes and always fitting Notre Dame in when you're asked, and just know how much we appreciate it. Thanks for being such a great Notre Dame man.
No, well, thank you for building me into this. It's been a great experience to this day. I love the decision I made so many years ago to go to Notre Dame. It's for people like you, so thank you, Dolly.
You're welcome. Go Irish.
Go Irish.
Well, thanks, Dolly and Julian. That'll just about do it for us here today on this edition of Football Fridays. I'd like to thank all of our guests and performers today, the Notre Dame Palm Squad, Harmonia, Beth Grizzoli, Lou Somogyi, Matt Fortuna, Rocky Bleier, Tony Rice, and, of course, Julian Love. Stay tuned for Chalk Talk with Bill and Bill coming up right here at 2:15. Former Fighting Irish assistant football coaches Bill Reagan and Bill Lewis will take a deep dive into the matchup with Clemson and provide their keys to an Irish win. We'll leave you today with a special performance of the Notre Dame Victory March, and see you again on December 4th for our season finale of Football Fridays at the ECK presented by Guinness. But for now, I'm Chris Palmquist from the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Go Irish, beat Tigers.